are talking Baghead, and this one stars Freya Allan, who you probably know from the Netflix show The Witcher. Now, this is a interesting premise. It has been likened to the movie Talk to Me, although I haven't seen that one, so I can't confirm that. It effectively focuses on a witch, and this witch is kind of like being held prisoner in this kind of basement, or this kind of what is now a pub. And there effectively is like this ritual that is kind of keeping her from escaping, and this witch is kind of beholden to for many centuries to kind of this line of kind of guardians who have been effectively the keepers of this kind of witch. And we learn a little bit of backstory as the film goes on. Now, this witch can actually bring back people who have died for 2 minutes, but it's kind of like this kind of ritual. And you know what has happened is that throughout the centuries, the Guardian of the time has been using this as a kind of a money-making scheme to let people communicate with loved ones. But it comes at a price if it's kind of it only lasts for 2 minutes. Otherwise, this kind of witch kind of takes control of the situation. And there's various kind of like side effects, ghostly manifestations that happens kind of around the area, and the Guardian at the time is effectively tied to this kind of pub, and they can't really leave, otherwise bad things happen. And this now falls to Freya Allan's character Iris, who is the latest Guardian after her father dies, as he has succumbed to illness. We presume being brought on by this kind of this curse. And she now inherits this pub, really not knowing anything about it, and finds out, yes, there is this witch in the basement who has kind of got a sack over her head, hence Baghead. And, she kind of feels like this is her thing now. She's kind of inherited this. It's a way to kind of make money. There seems to be a willing customer who's willing to kind of shell out to talk to his dead wife. Even though Iris's friend is kind of warning her against it, as there is ramifications, ghostly manifestations, and other ill effects that happens because of this. Now, what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's discuss. So, this movie, I think, has an interesting kind of premise. The setup, I would suggest, is possibly better than the execution here. Because I do think it's somewhat of an interesting, idea for a movie where we have this status quo which has happened through it's been going on through centuries, and this kind of witch, so to speak, is both an antagonist, but you kind of feel like she's also somewhat of a victim as well. And it was an interesting kind of idea here in Freya Allan's character Iris. As I say, she's kind of thrown into this. She's not really prepared for it. So I kind of like this idea of what would you do in this kind of situation. And it represents this kind of this portal into the world of the dead, where you can communicate with deceased loved ones, which may be appealing to kind of some. So yeah, I think the idea here is kind of fairly solid, or at least the premise is solid. But what else can I say that works in this movie's favour? Now, unlike many movies on this that we review here on the channel, this one is had a cinema release. It was kind of a little bit more kind of higher profile, a bit more mainstream than many of the the indie movies that we reveal here. So compared to them, it has a reasonable kind of production value. I think there's this old pub called the Queen's Head. It looks kind of dilapidated and kind of run down and suitably kind of spooky looking. There are a couple of kind of fun kind of jump scares and kind of creepy moments. And I will say, I think the ending is quite strong. The idea here, how it ended. Maybe some people won't like it, but I actually kind of did like it. I think it actually was okay. It ended fairly cleverly, because it kind of has this, without spoiling anything, it's like, oh, that kind of makes sense. And you can kind of see how, this kind of the machinations that were going on through this kind of witch's actions has led to this kind of the finale and the climax and stuff. So I thought it was kind of fairly clever. I think Freya Allan does an okay job here as to the kind of the rest of the cast. I don't think the writing is strong, and I don't think the kind of like the way these characters are written are particularly strong. But the acting, I would say, is it's all fine. I think there's nothing outstanding necessarily, but it's all kind of it's kind of fine. And again, because of the kind of the production value here, slightly higher than kind of a lot of the kind of the straight to kind of VOD and DVD stuff we see. Just the actual kind of cinematography looks a little bit better, and kind of set design, stuff like that looks a little bit kind of higher quality than maybe some. But let's talk about what I think does not work in this movie's favour. The big thing for me is I just think this is very typically a kind of Hollywood horror film. And when you watch this, ask yourself, if you were in the character of Iris, Freya Allan's character, what would you do in this kind of situation? Because I honestly don't think anyone would kind of act in the way that that character is written. So let me give you a start. So the character of Iris has no idea about what is down in the basement. So she goes down there, and the first thing she sees is this kind of like dilapidated old woman with a bag over her head coming out of a hole in the wall. Now, initially, surely you would think that that is just a woman who has been kept prisoner or something. I mean, that's how I would have reacted. You wouldn't assume there's anything supernatural necessarily about it. And the moment you did realise there was something supernatural, you would absolutely drop wolf's bait and run out of pure fear. But neither of those things happen. It's just kind of one of these typical kind of like, Hollywood sort of reactions to kind of like stuff that's happening, within the movie. It's like, oh, come on, it just doesn't make any sense in regards to what actually is real life is like. So the way these characters are written, and including like the kind of the male lead, who is this guy who wants to kind of see his dead wife, it's just like, man, like when you see his motivation, it's like whatever. It's just like, would you be that obsessed about it? I don't know. It's very much like this is like written just like a story from a screenwriter without any kind of, I think, realistic depictions of how people react. And we have Freya Allan's kind of friend. You just know she's kind of a red shirt. She is just there. And, oh great, we've her friend who is disposable, just like, it's very, very kind of typical. So, it's very much by the numbers in regards to plot. And the main thing for me, I mean, yeah, it's a generic film. But the main thing for me, I just didn't think the characters really acted like genuine kind of people, genuine kind of like reactions to stuff. And it always bothers me when we have things like this. But yes, I mean, again, the other thing is, yeah, it's super generic. I mean, when we kind of get going, like I said, I think the premise is solid, and I think it ends reasonably well. But the broad strokes of the movie are just by the numbers. It's just a very predictable, typical kind of like studio film in a way. That's what it kind of feels like. By the numbers, vanilla, generic, typical kind of horror movie, and a way overuse of CGI on the kind of the effects here. And that's the other thing I would say is, we have this kind of witch character, and they rather than going with a practical effects route, for the most part, it's CGI enhanced. CGI curling fingers, CGI scary face, CGI fire. I mean, it just doesn't look very good. I mean, like, this is a 2023 movie. It looks crap now in regards to the effects. In 5 years, this is going to look terrible. But it just doesn't look good. I mean, how difficult was it to light a sack on fire and things like this? It's just, again, it feels like it was just quickly made. CGI, the answer to all our problems with horror. Just make it, CGI. Let's not bother with any practical effects. No. So, great. It ends up being a typical kind of like CGI monster. And I think the originally the originality that I think it maybe had in its premise is just squandered on just a by-the-numbers horror film. Now, it's not a bad watch. I think if you don't, if you've seen the typical kind of like films that get churned out and kind of end up in the cinema for like 2 weeks, it's kind of like that. It's nothing special, but it is watchable, and I think the premise is okay. It just wasn't kind of taken advantage of. But I'll give it a 5 out of 10 because I do think it ended at least relatively well. So yeah, it's not a bad film. It's just totally forgettable. Have you seen Baghead? Please do let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.